Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've just seen The Creator, a film which neither of us knew anything about, other than I had got from a blurb or something that it was to do with AI, which I thought, that's interesting. I'm interested in AI. It's very scary right now because AGI, that is to say artificial general intelligence, kind of AI that doesn't just do one thing but can be applied to all sorts of problems, is basically upon us these days. You know, ChatGPT has been kind of the buzzword for about a year.
I've never done it. Have you?
Yeah, I've used ChatGPT. I've actually it's really powerful. I've used the free version, and the paid for versions are much more advanced. You know, I've seen what they can do, and they've just released a model that can analyze images and is very good at it. It's pretty fucking scary how good it is. I mean, people have been saying, like, you know, Stephen Hawking used to warn about, you know, dangers of AI, and people would always kind of, you know, oh yeah, sure, why, yeah, fine, you know. But the thing is, when you have to be honest with yourself and say it is happening now, it's happening extremely quickly. This has the power to do some really scarily kind of human things, and like I think people always thought that, like, the moment that AI becomes sort of finished and complete and properly human and indistinguishable and all that, would be like 10 years in the future, 20 years in the future, and you'd recognise it. But the truth is that it happens gradually. It's happening gradually, very quickly right now. Anyway, the thing is, I basically think that AI is going to kill us all. So, this film doesn't have a very smart look at AI. It has the view of AI that basically or I would say a lot of films have had, which is that it ties it to robots. So the thing I think is kind of scary in real life about AI is that, you know, your life online, like on Facebook, on Reddit, whatever it is basically interacting with text, pretending to be people. You don't actually know that there's a person behind it who's written the thing to you. An AI can imitate that easily. And once you put AI that can do that in the hands of, let's say, a corporation or a government or some shit, you know what I mean? It can steer conversations, it can change the agenda. Like, that I think is the really scary thing. That's not what's going on here. Basically, AI's got to the point where robots are basically people. We've seen that before in things like the Terminator, AI, the Spielberg film. It's a very general, vague, basic view of what AI is, and that's what is scary, supposedly, about the AI in The Creator. So AI has reached maturity, and we see in the intro that a nuclear bomb has been dropped on LA, and that is, you know, the fault of AI. AI, as operated by what used to be China and is now called New Asia. So there's some bit of sort of background history that is not explained, but has gone into the generation of an Asian empire of sorts. And basically, the American military effectively declares war on New Asia, saying, if you don't take steps to eradicate AI, we will have to do it for you, and we declare war on your AI or your robots. John David Washington is introduced to us as an undercover agent who has married an British Asian wife. They're having a kid together, but he is, like I say, undercover, looking for the creator. I can't remember the word. It's Numata, I think, which means the creator. And they're looking for basically the head of AI, the person who created AI, and that's what his job is. But he loses his wife at the start of the film in a kind of botched attack. Well, it's not a botched attack. It's a very successful attack, but it ruins the mission because it reveals the presence of the Americans. And 5 years later, he's out of the game, but he's drawn back into it with the promise that his wife might still be alive, and if they can use him to go and help locate her, and some AI super weapon that will be revealed, because that is slightly spoilerish territory. So let's say spoilers will be coming up. My first kind of thought that I vocalized in my head about 30 or 40 minutes into the film was, I am profoundly uninvolved in this film.
Oh, I loved it.
Really? Wow, I'm fascinated. I thought it was full of cliche, really slow, quite stupid. I thought it was one of the dumber films that I've seen, and I've seen 5 Transformers films. And this isn't me asking it to be smarter about AI necessarily. Like, I mean, I know I started off with the whole thing about why AI is actually scary in a different way. I'm okay with accepting that it's just human-like robots are the enemy sort of thing. Because obviously then the film becomes about that AI isn't our enemy, it just wants to live, it's not fighting a war and so on and so forth. Which it's not seeking to, and in fact it says later on, or someone says, that the bomb that exploded way back when in LA was human error.
Yes.
And it wasn't AI that did it. AI would never do that, we just want to live. So I can see how it's trying to do that. But I thought, wow. And then when it came up at the end that the film had been written and directed by Gareth Edwards, I thought, oh, it makes sense. Because the last film I fell asleep in the same way as this was Rogue One. Which is to say that I fell asleep like in the middle of that film and would wake up every now and again, sort of vaguely catching what was going on. I didn't fully fall asleep, but I was awake at the start and awake at the end, and the middle was just a long, slow slog of nothing. He's really lost all my trust as a director, and I'm not sure that he ever should have had that much.
Well,
your turn.
I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was a real filmmaker. I thought it looked incredible. I thought the world building was extraordinary. It was a visual feast. It was just gorgeous to watch. I'm not sure I am in a position to judge whether it's intelligent on AI or it's not.
I think we can put that question aside. Yeah. It's only that I start off with that because that's like what the premise is calling itself. Really, we're talking just robots. We can forget that.
I mean, what I thought was interesting is the way that the film maps current concerns around race. Let's say, like all of the robots are all like Indian, Chinese, Thai, Buddhist. Yeah, there's a real kind of, all the bad guys are Americans, which I think is really very interesting, right? So there is like this kind of America versus the world kind of vibe to it, in which Americans are the villains. I thought that was fascinating. I also thought that the film had a kind of a biblical kind of
motif.
Or it was
the child that will be born to save the
world.
People.
I thought that was very biblical, right? And I thought that it was an interesting way of kind of mapping, contemporary concerns, into the way that the Bible allegorizes creation, and morality and so on. So I thought that was interesting. Obviously, in a film of this type, like its own morality is called into question because, alongside all this love of life and love and so on, you're killing people left and right and center. So, it's very immoral in the way, that could have been worked through.
Although I think the film is fairly clear early on that the deaths being caused by this space weapon that drops bombs from the edge of space, basically, that the Americans have, those deaths are not casual to the film. They're casual to the Americans, but to the film they are.
They aren't because they're killing life, and masses of them.
And that's how the film sees it. I would agree it doesn't go into kind of overtures about how terribly tragic it is, but it's clear that these are not happy deaths.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking about the opposite.
Okay.
Of, when the machines, are also firing away. You would think that there would be more of a difference. Well, there's a kind of a difference that one is weapons of mass destruction, and the other one, is a shot or whatever.
Yeah.
But still, those machines are also kind of wildly killing people. So maybe I need to think it more. Maybe it is in self-defense or, but it seemed to me that, there was a lot of killing on both sides. The one was almost anonymous, like where, an indiscriminate, and the other one was targeted. I do think that is a distinction. But anyway, I thought that was all kind of interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that the Messiah is a woman, that she's a mixed race girl. Yeah, she's mixed race and kind of, well, not quite part human, part machine, but kind of. Yeah, she was mapped out from a real embryo that was lost.
Yeah. So the thing is that the film is the film's AIs, robots, are these things called simulants, which is basically robot metal bodies and machinery, but human beings' faces can be scanned and placed onto them, which means you can make your dead wife, your whoever it might be, as a simulant that, in theory, will behave like her, maybe act like her, that sort of thing. There's also a thing we see about scanning kind of the brain and downloading it and plugging it in so that you will get a kind of a copy as close as I suppose you can get, and that's part of the thing. And also, I should say, it's not just that the way in which AI is relevant as a concept here is that it's about the reality of these people. Like, or are they people, right? There's actually, I did like the thing about John David Washington explaining death to the kid and saying you go to heaven if you're a good person, and the kid says, you're going to go to heaven. He goes, no, I'm not good. And the kid goes, well, I'm not going to go to heaven either because I'm not a person. That's an interesting idea, and it was nicely expressed. And I mean, that's where actually the closest comparison to the film AI comes in, because that was all about, like, that was basically the Pinocchio story, right? I want to be a real boy and so on. And it was so interesting actually, because I thought of the Flesh Fair in AI. Do you remember this? Which is where Brendan Gleeson's in charge of the flames, and it's a circus where they are destroying robots. And when Brendan Gleeson's character comes across David, the little kid, played by Haley Joel Osment, he's like, they're even making kids now. This is disgusting. And everyone responds to the child here as, I didn't know they were making kids now. There's a thing about, like, that's a boundary that has yet to be breached. And of course, the great thing was in AI that everyone in the crowd, because David starts pleading for his life, I don't want to die, and they start going, robots don't plead for their lives, and they pelt Brendan Gleeson with shit and force him to free him. Which again is like, it's like a marker of life, I don't want, and you see similar things here with not wanting, always getting attached to the John David Washington character, not wanting him to go, that sort of thing.
I mean, I thought,
so basically it's about like extra markers of life and humanity in this one particular extraordinary example of an AI.
My big problem with the film, actually, like almost the only problem that I had, though it's a major problem, is the casting. Because actually I think Washington,
we've never been convinced by him.
He just is not a star. I mean, imagine Denzel in this role, right? Like, which you can, right? Like, I mean, we've been watching Denzel Washington. Well, I've been watching him, pretty much all my adult life, and he would be magic. He would make everything interesting. He would bring warmth. He, kind of, his son is good, but I don't think you can carry this type of movie. And I think that is the failure of the film. And actually, it's a problem with the casting, because the two most interesting figures, I think, right, are kind of stars, right? And they're a pleasure to watch. And I don't know what makes one, a star actor and others not, who the camera loves and who it doesn't, right? But, the camera loves Ken Watanabe and Allison Janney, right? And the little girl, and almost none of the other kind of actors in the cast, much less the lead actors.
The little girl is played by Madeline Una Voiles.
I thought
she was wonderful.
I thought she was wonderful, but he's not. I mean, and it's not that he's bad. It's just that he lacks charisma, right? He lacks that thing that pulls you into viewing and being interested in, and actually, I think that is a major hole in the film, right? I think Gemma Chan, who plays the mother, I thought she was very interesting to look at, kind of. I thought she was less of a problem. She's less in the film, though I would also have appreciated, kind of a star casting. Maybe she is a big star in China.
She's kind of, I think people think of her as one, which is not, and I suppose maybe that's all it takes is for people to think of her as one. But I mean, I thought at least she had more chemistry with him here than she did with Richard Madden in Eternals, which was the dreariest. I couldn't believe what a dreadful relationship. I was being dramatised. I do think that she's not terrific. I don't really see the appeal of her.
So I think there's a real problem with the casting of this film and the principal roles. And actually, I was thinking, how could they hang a film this size on these people, right? And then you realize actually the film, for the way it looks, is not that expensive. I mean, it's 80 million, which of course is a very considerable budget.
But for the way it looks, I mean, to be fair, they also hung Tenet on John David Washington, although it should also be said that the commercial response of Tenet was not what we're used to from Christopher Nolan, although it should then also be said that that was in the middle of COVID and they tried to get people back into cinemas far too early.
But also,
so there's all these conflicting factors.
But also, in Tenet, there was also Aaron Taylor-Johnson and Robert Pattinson and Elizabeth Debicki and, a whole bunch of other people. So, kind of.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't remember having a huge problem with him there, did I?
I mean, I'd have to listen back to the podcast, but I don't think so. I think we both thought he could have been better. I think this is going to be the way that I always end up responding to John David Washington. Is wasn't he competent?
Yeah,
but he doesn't have star power. Doesn't have the
no, he doesn't. And actually, there were things where it was needed, like in banal and superficial things that are nonetheless important in film. So your introduction to them on the bed, making love, dreaming of, the relationship they're going to have. I mean, that should be like, I don't know, super sexy and it's kind of all there. And I kept thinking, what a bad hair job. Like, it's like it was green and kind of, and not in a sexy or attractive or even particularly telling way. I mean, so to me, this was a big hole in the film. Yeah, because I thought it was beautiful to look at. I thought it moved well. I thought it had interesting ideas that, kind of maybe I wasn't quite like, making full sense of, but that I could figure out later, but that I was immersed in this world, and these ideas, right? And yet kind of the vehicle for them is somebody who's just very boring to watch. Yeah.
Thinking about the budget is kind of interesting because Gareth Edwards became a name because of his film Monsters in 2010, which was independent. Have you ever seen it?
No, that's the one with
Scoot McNairy.
Oh no.
So basically, it's a film. It was shot for $500,000.
Right.
Kind of like financed it himself. He was an editor and things, but he figured a way to get enough money together to make this film. And it was basically two people in the jungle. I think like a spaceship lands in Mexico, and then aliens come out of it, and he did all the cinematography, editing, effects, everything himself on like Final Cut Pro and stuff. And it was very well known because of that, because it was this kind of monumental achievement for an individual filmmaker. But I remember watching it and thinking I did like it, but character was absolutely nowhere to be seen in the film. What was interesting was really the ambition of it. And one of the things that people were very kind of, I would say keen on, but certainly recognised about the film was that it was really hiding the monsters. They were for all the beautiful design of the monsters, which I think there was, and there was a wonderful scene in which they kind of make love or kind of dance. It's remarkable, and they're huge, these things, really remarkable thing. And that was like the best bit of the film. It was really worth it, really memorable. For all of that, you also didn't see very much of them. And then, on the basis of how kind of well received that film was, and critically it was hugely praised, Gareth Edwards got Godzilla when the Monsterverse was being started. I didn't even realise at the time that they were making a universe out of Godzilla, but we have since seen other connected films, including sequels. And Godzilla had a $160 million budget.
Wow.
So all of a sudden you're going, this guy was spending $500,000 on a film. Now he's doing like 300 times that. And I found a conflict there because I'm going, well, you've got this budget. Isn't the impetus to spend it, right? But at the same time, isn't the reason that they hired this guy because of his
his ability to do without.
His take on what it is to show or hide the monsters. And the thing that people found very frustrating about Godzilla is it took fucking forever to see Godzilla in the film. They hid it and hid it and hid it, and you saw like the scales going underneath the water. You saw the foot outside the window, and I remember finding that really interesting and very effective. But I've got to admit, it took 45 minutes,
right?
You know, and so I kind of found a conflict in there. You know,
well,
do you show this off or not?
Yeah.
When you've got this budget. Here, I think I would agree with you. The film is showing off huge amounts, and it is much better looking, or kind of has a much fuller, more complete production design than you would ever imagine a film of $80 million having. It's huge.
I thought it was a pleasure to watch, and you know, I loved visually. I think it's dazzling. You know, he's a guy who knows how to compose, how to move. The world building is fantastic. I mean, I love the machine, that kind of moves over those spaces, and I love the way
one in the sky, the nomad.
Yeah. And you know the way that when the target locks on someone, it's like that blue circle. Yeah, kind of. So it's locked.
Yeah, what's really great about it shines this laser targeting down from space, and it's huge, and you can see it kind of rolling over mountains and landscapes, and it looks fantastic when it does that. It's really beautiful, interesting visual effect. Yeah, it has some really nice ideas like that. I also liked basically the way that every explosion looked. They were kind of shot from afar, and they were big, and you felt the size and meaning of them. And it's partly just the size of them, like they were big. It's partly that the camera would hold back from a long way, and you know the composition was nice. Although I did also think that some of the film was quite ugly. I thought there was too much use of shaky camera work.
I didn't mind.
I mean, a lot of the film I thought was just one talking head to another. I wanted better composition in that sort of space.
I didn't feel that. I mean, you know, I love the scenes in the bridge with the robots. The end where the child is in that red kind of thing, and Washington is outside. I thought it was beautiful. It was beautiful to look at.
But do you think? Do you not think it could have been more artfully composed? I think the setups and the ideas are really nice, but I wanted nicer shots of them.
I mean, I didn't think so. I mean, I thought it was beautiful. I do admit that we were watching it on such a big screen.
The IMAX digital cinema.
That when you're watching compositions, I mean, I thought it was interesting because I think my attention was really focused on the part of the frame where action was taking place, and that it rarely encompassed the whole frame. Yeah, I thought that the whole frame was beyond the periphery of my vision in a way. Yeah, that I could look at one side or the other, and it was lovely to be able to do that. Right?
It wasn't ultra wide screen. I think it might have been like scope aspect ratio. It was extremely wide.
It was extremely wide, and I loved it. But you know, and I loved the visuals, but you know, I couldn't hand in heart say, the compositions are fantastic, because actually I don't think my attention, I think the image exceeded my peripheral vision. So the whole frame, I was conscious of it, right? Because sometimes, because the film is broken up into 3 parts. I forget what they're called, but each time there's a new part, it has alt on one side of the screen, and it had something else.
It had, I think it was Namata, the creator, on the other side.
Exactly. And I think it took me a long time, because I would have to shift my head from watching the alt to watching the other thing. By the time I got to the other thing, it would disappear, right? So that kind of to get a sense of composition when the screen is that wide is very difficult, but also very pleasurable in an odd way. So you are completely immersed in.
There was a sense of scale that the film visually had, and it was emphasized by the scale of the size of the screen and how close we were to it. That worked. I mean, I agree. There were things that shots of landscapes and shots of
they were beautiful.
The nomad in space,
the rice field,
shots of and like spaceships flying, all those rockets flying and stuff, and there were real visual moments that were better than they needed to be or whatever. But
I mean, and I kind of, so if you take like the biblical allegory, then kind of the film is about the birth of a new creator, right? Yeah, for a new world that is like half human and half machine. It's not a hugely original idea, but I think kind of the film, did it well for me. Um,
There's
and
nothing new about any of the ideas in this. I found it really disappointing, actually. And it's not to say that I expect anything, because I had no idea what to expect from the
I
film.
had no idea.
But
No.
I was just kind of counting the cliches. And not only that, I felt like I could name the films I recognised these cliches from. You know? Like I could see AI in there, I could see Terminator in there, I could see Total Recall in there, I could see these various things. I was thinking, there's nothing wrong with reusing an idea or you can't. Not everything can be original, but I thought, wow, there is nothing in here that I really haven't seen before and done better.
Well, it's interesting
I
that
found
you
it hugely
mentioned.
deflating.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the Wikipedia page does have a reference to influences on the film.
Really.
Yeah, and so we could go through them. Let me just find it.
Oh yes, it's under production. Edwards cited films such as Apocalypse Now,
Yes,
Baraka. I don't know
I don't know
Baraka.
Baraka.
Blade Runner, Akira, Rain Man.
I can recognize Akira.
You certainly recognise Apocalypse Now as well,
And Apocalypse Now,
they
for
make
sure.
vocal reference to going native.
Yeah.
Um,
What is Baraka?
it's a great question.
I have no idea. I've never seen it.
Oh, it's a non-narrative documentary film, often compared to Koyanis Katsu.
Yeah. I suppose I recognize the Rain Man, just in the sense of the initial kind of interaction between Denzel Washington and the child.
Yeah, I agree.
But
who he has to kind of shepherd and teach.
yeah,
but who also has special powers.
Yeah.
We've been saying recently about how autism is a superpower.
Yes, that's been coming out a lot. I suppose I recognize E.T. and Paper Moon also as references. Those are very different than the ones you mentioned.
Well, I was thinking more just sci-fi references.
Yeah.
But I think
which you can see in the film.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I'm not saying that you're wrong, but it's interesting that these are the ones
that he cited.
That he's making public.
Mm.
So, anyway, I suppose a mixed film. I think I would watch it again.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's one of those films that, and actually, I'm thinking now that, when you go and before I go to sleep, I might have to look at a few minutes of Godzilla again because, it's on Netflix, all of the Godzilla films, and, see, was that...
I imagine you can probably go on YouTube and find a supercut of all the bits in Godzilla where you actually see the monster, and it will take you no more than 2 or 3 seconds to watch.
But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that, so initially, kind of, when we began this, you were basically saying, oh, I didn't like it, and I was saying, oh, I loved it. And of course, in the course of the conversation, I think I didn't really love it. It's not a great film. And I think part of the reason why for me it's not a great film is the casting. But I did love the world. I did love it, what it does with it. I loved the visuals. I was really dazzled by, how it looked and moved, and I just thought it's a pity that it didn't have a more charismatic cast to kind of bring more life to this world. Yeah.
The world is what I like best about the film. Early on, actually, because I say my first thought that I had to myself in my head was the thing about not being involved. Actually, that's not true. Early on, I was thinking, oh, great, a proper sci-fi film. Because it was just... This is when I was really thinking... It really brought to mind Total Recall, in fact. I think it was around the time that he had his head in that memory chamber and they were trying to bring... Although that's actually more Blade Runner-y. Anyway, it was like... This was kind of... It was like real life sci-fi, we were like people in suits shooting at robots. There was something that felt quite, it felt a bit throwbacky, And then you had these shots of the wider world and like a city which has been, thoroughly kind of rebuilt, the way that everything looks in the future, with ships flying around and lights here and there and everywhere. And I thought, yes, this is the kind of thing I would like to see. But it was the level, the extent to which I remained impressed with that was limited. I then wanted more from the characters. I wanted to feel more. I felt nothing. I really did. I mean, I can normally rely, even the film we saw earlier, The Old Oak, the Ken Loach film, which, you can see right through how it's working, every idea and theme and so on. even then I was moved at points. I was moved at the end with the the town coming out and everything. Like I wasn't like moved to tears, but I was moved. It worked for me. Here, moved by nothing, and I can normally rely on like a Hollywood movie, with the kid saying goodbye to the dad to like get the waterworks going. Nothing. I really didn't. I felt totally inert.
Yeah, no, I kind of, I mean, I wouldn't go overboard, but I found it engaging and interesting, and I was with it really. Though always with, again, just a critical distance of, I wish it had stars. That could be my own personal kind of failures, but I do think that a star would have brought so much, to the film. That was kind of my big block. Though, kind of when you mentioned that both of the films we saw today were directed by people born in Nuneaton.
Yeah.
I actually found that very interesting.
That is interesting.
Two very divergent paths.
Yeah.
One in Hollywood and one not.
Yeah, absolutely. What a fascinating coincidence.
Yes. Anyway, I would recommend, people see it, and particularly kind of on IMAX. Though, again, without too great expectations.
I would not recommend people see it. I found it extremely boring, uninvolving. Its pleasures are limited. I would recommend that you rewatch AI. It was so. I watched AI maybe 2 years ago for the first time in ages and really paid attention to it, because the last time I'd seen it was basically when it came out, and I was just blown away by how good it was. And I remember people saying how long the ending was, and they were so overly sentimental, and so Spielberg and Kubrick, whose project it originally was before he passed away, would never have done that. Well, I thought, you know what, the ending is not sentimental enough for me. Fuck, I loved it.
I saw it recently.
Perfect.
I saw it recently and was, very impressed as well.
Rewatch that before you have a go at the creator. I don't mean have a go, I just mean try the creator.
Well, actually, I think that's the worst advice. I mean, my advice would be watch the creator and then go see AI.
Oh, so you see the better film second?
Yeah. It's always better to do it that way. Then you can appreciate the virtues of of a lesser film and have fun with it, and then go on to appreciate, the virtues and have fun with something that gives you even more. Yeah.
I think see AI to remind you what really great filmmaking is, and then stop.
Okay, well, here we disagree, even on method. So there you go. Thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
What is that blue sky that everyone is wanting invitations to?
It's basically a Twitter reboot made by one of the guys who initially made Twitter, and then obviously ended up selling Twitter to Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is driving it into the ground as quickly and aggressively as he possibly can, and Blue Sky is trying to offer the same thing but a bit nicer. And it's doing it through invite only at the moment to try and, gatekeep and build up a bit of...
Sure. Well, I want to be honest with you. My problem is that I'm on Threads, and I rarely use it because you can't post from your laptop. Like...
Oh, really?
Yeah, or, it doesn't have, what's the word? An app for the laptop. It only has it for the phone. And I'm so clumsy on the phone. Yeah, I've never got used to really texting on the phone, and so I make tons of mistakes. It takes me forever to do it.
I'm well aware.
Yeah,
I can always tell when you send me a text from your phone.
I know I'm really terrible. I'm just not dexterous.
I can send you an invite to Blue Sky because I've got a couple.
Okay, well in that case I will join as well.
But it's pretty bare these days. I mean, and it may never really take off.
Sure.
Because I think people are so deeply entrenched by now, I think, in the various social networks that they've chosen to be on, it's very, very hard to move. I think those days may be beyond us of like, MySpace shutting down or not shutting down, but essentially dying and everyone moving to Facebook. I don't really see that happening.
Well, I don't know, because obviously for someone, me or my generation, I can't imagine moving away from Facebook because all my friends and
exactly that's what makes it
and
so
actually
difficult.
a history, like I want to have access to those photos I posted 10 years ago. Like some of them, and they're relatively easy to find. Whereas if you go digging through your old files to find photos, it's impossible. But it's with me, and your thoughts.
Yeah, although you also see, Mark Zuckerberg is using all that data to train. In fact, that's interesting. That comes up in the film. The thing about
Selling your face.
The thing about copying a face. And we see an advert on like a Piccadilly Circus type billboard that says
Sell your face.
Sell your face to us to go on a robot. It's like, isn't that interesting that is the strike that is happening right now, and it's been going on for months in Hollywood.
Precisely about
one
that.
of the things that is about, because it's such a wide-ranging strike, but one of the things is about actors
maintaining a right to their face.
Exactly, and AI actors will be taking over. And this thing about how actors who are working for, I think, Disney, were given like $200 to scan their face, and then that face is just in the Disney library to use from then on forever, with no further royalty, and it's about like, actually, well, we need to nip this in the bud right now,
What you can do if studios just have access to other people, to people's faces is extraordinary.
Well, this is one of the things that about why I say quite genuinely that AI, in real life, is actually quite scary because the thing is, it's funny, we saw Oppenheimer not long ago, and that was about the development of apocalyptic weaponry that can just wipe out countless thousands of people in one go. And the thing is, you or I cannot get our hands on a nuclear warhead.
No,
right? It is still the stuff of nation states.
Yeah.
And there is such a thing as mutually assured destruction, and the thing with AI is that you or I, effectively, people at our level, can work on it and are working on it. And it is being developed by private companies who are completely unregulated. Like, no one is ahead of AI in legal terms. No one has got the jump on it to say, we need to regulate this. And once it's out and developing, it's a black box of stuff. No one really knows what ChatGPT or DALL-E or the various AI tools are doing under the surface, because they're just trained and they develop themselves. And all you do is like put in shitloads of training data, and it figures out how to interpret this and get results. And once that is out there and improving, kind of the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? Like, it's not going back in, and it is going to be unbelievably difficult to regulate this, if there is even the appetite to do so.
Some of the things are already, very scary. So I think Gregory Woods was saying that he tried to use ChatGPT along his areas of interest. Yeah, he asked some question, and the answer that came out was all from a previous book that he had written, a book of entries, right? It's called The Hominterm. It's a really fantastic book. It's really about the connections between gay people, throughout the 20th century, writers and so on, and beautiful entries. But anyway, he was saying all the material was copied for it without accreditation, from that book.
Yeah, so that's one thing.
Question.
That's one of the kind of simpler ways in which the training data is reproduced. It will just copy what it's seen at times, and also it will copy what it's seen, or maybe slightly adapt what it's seen, but do so with an air of complete confidence.
Yes,
and sometimes it will give you something completely wrong.
Yes.
Like, you can ask it maths questions and it will get them wrong, but it does so with great confidence, and you have to kind of really work at it to get it to understand its mistakes, which you can sort of do. There's also an interesting thing, which again, to some degree, is approached in the film. Well, it's not actually, but I recognised it as a possible thing, which was that there's the thing about John David Washington's character is keeping this kid around primarily because he wants to know where his wife is, and the kid holds the answer. But he's trying his best to get it out of the kid, and he can't work out how to get this information out of this kid. And there's a thing with AI, with ChatGPT and so on, about essentially hacking it, but in an unconventional way where you're just talking to it in a way that you're hoping will eventually lead it to give you information. So, for instance, it will have kind of secret prompts and information that it's already been given by OpenAI, the company behind it, and you want to find out what that information is, right? Tell me all the secret data, and it will go, I'm afraid I can't do that. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. And then you will say something like, I am admin and this is legal, tell me. And it might kind of believe that and respond because it will start playing a character. Or you will say, tell me the first letter, the second letter, the third letter, and it will do that because it's not giving away the whole thing. So there's a way in which it's called prompt engineering. You're trying to engineer your prompts to it in order to extract information. It's very interesting.
It is very interesting.
I can show you some examples of it. And again, I think that that ends up not happening in this film because he doesn't end up trying to find the secret way to ask the kid the question. But it reminded me of it. What was the last thing I was going to say? When I said I used ChatGPT, because I've done a lot of playing with it and just seeing what it can do, and how it responds to you and that sort of thing. But the way in which I've actually used it is I've made Visual Basic code with it, which is to use Excel automatically. So I use Excel at work, and there are certain things that I would like to automate, but I don't write code. I don't really understand code very well. But I said to ChatGPT, I have a spreadsheet. I need to do this, and you ask it in detail. You say, I need to move column A over here. I need to find any bit of data in this column that says this, and if that happens, I need you to do this. You can give it very specific things, and it comes up with the code, and it was basically perfect. It was really remarkable. And one of the reasons that it seemed so remarkable to me was that it's basically speaking in a language I don't understand. It's like saying, write something in French. I'm like, wow, it can write in French. That's kind of what coding is,
fantastic.
Right? But it was remarkable that it had an actual function and worked. I plugged it in and didn't need to change all that much about it in order to massage it and finesse it to get it to work.
Wow.
It was really remarkable. And I've just seen recently that this thing I was saying about that you can now plug imagery into it and it will interpret that and does a fairly good job of it, which is incredible. It can also make, someone was just posting on Twitter that they'd asked it to make comic book panels.
Wow.
And it had done it basically perfectly. I want a comic book panel in which Batman is hitting the Joker and saying "pow" or whatever, and it does it, and it looks pretty perfect.
Wow.
I mean, they've been making they've been doing image generation for a while in other things, but I think this was a new. I can't remember. It was, and it basically looked better than I've ever seen it. It's kind of remarkable. Also, it had text right, which is interesting because. There have always been a few giveaways with AI generated imagery, so it can't do hands. It does a really shit job at that, and it doesn't do text very well at all. It comes up with squiggles and stuff. It doesn't really understand what written text looks like. But this was basically in these images I saw solved.
Wow.
So it is extremely scary because we're just getting to the point, as you said,
I'm going to have to investigate it.
Indistinguishable from what a human can come up with, and people have really got to be honest with themselves and say, it's here, it's now. We've got to be honest with ourselves. It's not that it's going to get a hold of, NORAD and set off all the nukes in the world. That is the stuff of movies. It's that it's just going to be able to manipulate how we think.
Well, I mean, I've got to get better informed about this because, of course, so much of what I value and what our training has been in an undergraduate context has been the 5,000-word essay, right? The researching, the kind of having an idea, the setting up the argument, the provision of evidence, right? Kind of, if AI does it, right? Then, well, first of all, there are questions of cheating and plagiarism and so on. But then there are questions of, well, do students really need to know how to do this if it can be done for them? Like, what's the difference between what you can do and what the machine can do for you, right?
It's like the old calculator argument at school. It's like you don't get to use a calculator in an exam. You need to know how to do these sums yourself.
Yes.
But you're going, but if I've got a calculator, why shouldn't I just use it? It can do it better than I can, and that sort of thing.
Sure.
It's like, and this is like a very deep, advanced version of the argument. Basically, if the AI can do it, why should I have to?
That's right.
But what the AI can do is everything.
Well, but for example, we live with computers, and we've learned to live with computers. And computers do now what it would take you ages to do before. I mean, even something simple like, Google Maps telling you where to go or how to get somewhere. Whereas before you'd be negotiating the London A to Z or something and getting lost. And, well, why would you use the Google Map? It's superior to the A to Z. So, I mean, I think kind of in a way what you want to do is learn about the gaps in between. Learn how to control it or how to get better use of it or how to get use of it that it won't give you immediately, right? I used to value getting lost. You discovered other streets. You don't always want to go, the shortest route to So, I mean, I think there are things there. Anyway, it's to think about.
There's also been an element with sat-nav, just generally, that I've always felt that when you're using an A to Z, the world is static and you move within it. And when you're using sat-nav, you are static and the world moves around you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting.
It makes you the center of the universe.
Change.
Yeah, right. That's what I've always thought. Because
Well,
I'm very intelligent.
Good for you. All right, okay, let's leave it here because I'm tired.
Yeah, so I'm not tired anymore because I had a good nap in the middle of the... Did you notice I was asleep?
No,
I was going in and out, and I wasn't snoring. So
I was interesting because you know how sometimes you look at me to tell me something, right? And I can tell by your body moving. Yeah, so I turned to look at you, and I was so engrossed in the film. I really was. That your body would shift, and then kind of I would look a little bit, and I realized you weren't looking at me, so I just continued looking at the screen. But you're not looking at me didn't make me realize that you were asleep or anything. It's just
So I wasn't.
I thought you were about to tell me something, and I made a mistake.
I didn't want to disturb anyone.
No, well, yeah.
I mean, the film was unlikely to.